Okay, so we're back here and we're going to be talking about this. And I brought on a special guest, Dr. Alpana Shukla, and she is an associate professor of research in medicine at the Weill Cornell Medical College and associate attending physician at New York Presbyterian Hospital. Let me tell you, she is a pioneer in this whole meal sequencing or food order, and she's going to tell us more about that. She's doing this for over 10 years. She's like the guru of this. So I want to thank you so much for coming on Spot On.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be on this program, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about the work that my group has been doing for over 10 years. In fact, I was just telling them just before getting on this call with you that this is our 10th anniversary, and we
Wow.
plan to have a big celebration later.
Yes, yes, please take them all out for dinner. My goodness, this is great. And maybe you can do some food ordering when you're out to dinner. So,
Absolutely.
Doctor, tell my listeners and viewers, what is food order or meal sequencing? What is it really?
Sure. So the term food order or meal sequence really refers to the order in which, the meal components are eaten. So when you think about a typical meal, it has vegetables, it has some protein-rich foods, and it has some starch. So really it's talking about not the actual foods you're eating or the amounts you're eating, which is where a lot of nutrition advice, might be centered, but really about the order in which you're eating those meal components. When do you eat your proteins? When do you eat your starch? Do you eat it at the beginning, at the end, or all together? And like we've been working on this strategy and trying to figure out what's the best sequence for people to eat so that they can manage their sugars as well as their body weight more effectively.
I mean, it is absolutely fascinating, and I'm like your biggest fan because to me, it's just fascinating the order and what an effect it can have on your blood glucose levels. And we're going to get into that. So, explain how, the order of your food may change your blood glucose levels.
Sure. So when we started this work, with our first study, which was back in 2015, we just thought about two ways of eating. We thought look at two ways of eating, have a meal, like a typical meal actually that people eat in New York. So it was actually some vegetables, it was grilled chicken, and there was ciabatta bread. And so the ciabatta bread was freshly baked from the obo pan, which was, below our metabolic kitchen. And what we did is we had, participants come into our clinical and translational science center, and we had them just eat the meal, on 2 different days, so a week apart. And these were all people who had diabetes, relatively well controlled. They were on metformin.
Mhm.
And the first time they came in for the study, we gave them the bread, and then we had them wait for 15 minutes, and then we gave them the grilled chicken and the vegetables to eat. We called them back a week later, and we gave them the same meal again, the exact same meal, the same food, the same amounts. And we had them eat it in the exact reverse sequence, which means they ate the
Mm.
vegetables and the chicken first, and then they waited 15 minutes, and then they ate the bread at the end. So the thing I really want to emphasize is that, when we did these studies, we had all the participants eat everything on both occasions. So it wasn't like, they ate less at one time and they ate more, because really the idea was to try and understand what does the sequence itself actually do to your sugars if you keep everything else the same. And yeah, and then to be honest, what we found was fairly dramatic the first time. We saw that, the overall glucose curve, if you like, what we call the area of glucose, when we plotted like the blood sugars at
Mhm.
multiple time points up to 120 minutes, and we found it was like 70% lower. Now you tell
Wow.
me what that means. Like that is like, to be honest, when I first plotted the graph, and I have this, this is like, one of those things you remember for years and years.
Yes.
It's like that moment. And I always love showing this graph, even when I presented at the ADA and I put this picture up of the graph, which shows the glucose curve when you eat the bread first versus starting the meal with the bread and starting the meal with the chicken and vegetables and saving the bread at the end. It looks so dramatic that when I put this picture up, actually, there was like a collective gasp from the audience because, and these are all people who treat diabetes. So it was beautiful, but because it was so dramatic, I had to be certain that this is really true and valid and, it needed to be repeated. And so we did a few more studies after that, not only in people with diabetes, but also in people with pre-diabetes. Like,
Mhm.
it's, the number of people who have pre-diabetes is enormous, right, in the country. Like, what is it, like at least 1 in 3 or even more. So we're looking at a huge population that could be impacted. And consistently, in all of the studies, what we found is that when you save the carbs for the end compared to eating it in the beginning, you will consistently lower the glucose spikes. We actually, this happens in people with diabetes, but also happens in people with pre-diabetes. In fact, in people with pre-diabetes, they tend to have a lot of spikes, but they also crash later on. Like, we see that all the time. And it was so dramatic, in the study, like one of the patients actually became hypoglycemic when we gave
Wow.
it. Yeah, it was the only adverse event in that trial. It was,
So, I mean, that is dramatic. So you
yeah,
had a 70%, lower spike by just having the vegetables, the chicken, and the bread. And that is amazing. This is why I'm having you on here, because I find that when I read that, it is so fascinating. And you're spot on. I mean, we have a lot of people with diabetes. We have over 25 million people with diabetes, but we have like over 96 million with pre-diabetes.
that's
So,
right.
thinking about just changing the order, of it and having those starches later after the protein and the vegetables, what that could do for those people to better control their blood glucose levels. And that was terrific. I mean, well, of course you're smart, but how smart of you to make them eat it all, because if you would have reversed the order, they had the vegetables first and then the chicken and then then less bread. You say, oh, it's because they ate less, but no.
Right,
I mean, that's just absolutely fascinating. Now,
right.
what do you think it is? Is it the fiber in the vegetables? Is it the protein in the chicken, that suppressed? What do you think it is? What?
Sure. So I think, it's a combination of both. So I think what we're seeing is the combined effect of the fiber in the vegetables, the fiber.
Mm-hmm.
And so we use fiber-rich vegetables
Hmm.
and then, the protein as well. And we know that, from previous studies, a lot of work had been done prior to our work, just looking at what they call pre-meal, giving things like whey protein, and stuff like that. And, there's been studies which show that if you do that, you're going to see like a lower glucose, if you
Hmm.
give it about 30 minutes before, and then you are able to actually stimulate a much bigger GLP-1 response, the hormone
Hmm.
that everybody's talking about, that, the Ozempic and the Mounjaro and everything else that's actually based on that molecule. So this is kind of, it's obviously, I want to be very clear, this is physiological, that's pharmacological, so
Right.
huge difference, but this is kind of a way, like a natural way to engage your own physiology. That's what I tell my patients. You know what? You can change, there are certain ways in which you can change and regulate your own physiology, harness your own hormones in the best possible way to support, your glucose management and your weight management. And so this is kind of this is where, this is positioned.
Can you explain how that food order, how it affects the GLP-1? And people know of the medications, but how it affects your natural.
Sure. So what we found is that when people ate the vegetables and proteins first, they had a bigger GLP-1 response. So they actually had a much stronger GLP-1 response versus when they ate the the carb portion or the breads or whatever, the starch portions first. So that is again important because I think that has two effects. One is that it helps in regulating the sugars better.
Hmm.
It slows the rate at which, your stomach empties, the gastric emptying, and also helps in so people feel fuller as well.
Right.
And that can
Right.
also help in, regulating your appetite and weight.
This is so fascinating because, this is all the rage, these your GLP-1 medications. And here, 10 years ago, you already naturally figured out by changing the order of the consumption of the food had this physiologic effect and it's for free. I mean, you have to get a prescription. This is like totally amazing. And what else I love about this order of eating is it actually could improve the quality of your diet. So if you got in the habit of having vegetables first, which by the way, and you and I both know, most Americans do not eat enough vegetables in the diet and you ate them first, right? And then you ate some protein, you're going to improve the quality because if you wait the inverse to bread first and then protein the vegetable, by the time you get to the vegetables, you're just picking at the vegetables. But if you reverse it when you're most hungry, you're going to get more vegetables in. You're going to get them in before you get stuff. I just think this is absolutely fascinating.
I couldn't agree with you more, and interestingly, we found that, we did a study actually, a real world study. So the initial work that we did was all very controlled, translational, like, get
Mhm,
people in and, have all my students watching them and making sure they're eating in that way. But the question always that comes up is what happens in the real world? What can people actually
mhm,
do? And so when we did the study actually in people with pre-diabetes, it was a 4-month study.
mhm,
And we just had people randomized to either just like a standard, lifestyle counseling. And then the other group had standard counseling. And we also added, just the food order advice.
mhm,
And and to be honest, what we did find at the end was that the food order group did change, like you said, diet quality improved, they
mhm.
were consuming more vegetables and more protein, at the end of the study. And this is despite the fact that we didn't say that there was no, advice to actually increase anything. The advice was to eat in that order. But so the beauty, I think, is that, rather than telling people, don't eat this, don't eat that. You just, so it's kind of a natural way to sort of get into a habit where you're consuming things in a certain sequence, which prioritizes what is nutrient dense and healthier for you first.
And let's face it, if you're doing vegetables first, let's just say you start a meal with a salad. Well, something, it takes a while to eat a salad. I mean, you got to chew it and everything. It's a lot. So that's got to slow down your
Yeah,
eating speed. Now,
yeah,
we know from research that if you slow down, that, it takes some time for your stomach to tell your brain you're full. So if you slow down, you may be able to appease your hunger with less calories. When you eat fast, you may overconsume, right?
absolutely. I could absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this would be, it's going to slow down your eating. It's going to get the vegetables in. And we have a peer that we both just admire, Dr. Barbara Rolls from Penn State. I interviewed her on season 11 here. She is such a doll. I love her to pieces. But her whole thing, it was a volumetric diet. And that's what
Yeah,
she did when she, gave the salad first or a soup, with vegetables. People ate about 10% less of the meal because of that vegetables first. So, for weight management, it's also a really good this order of going in. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm so excited to have you on because you've been doing this for 10 years, but we needed to get you out there because this is just absolutely fascinating. The other effect of the food order, I read, because I read your papers here. It's a suppression of ghrelin. Can you explain what ghrelin is and how it does that?
Sure. Yes. So ghrelin is a hunger hormone. This is the hormone that
Hmm.
actually tells you, to eat. You feel, and when people have a meal, the natural response is that the ghrelin levels will drop. So
Hmm.
when we did our food order studies, and we had people eat, in the different ways, the different sequences. What we found was that when people saved the carbs for the end, started
Hmm.
with the veggies and the proteins first, the ghrelin levels were suppressed for much longer,
Mm.
when and in contrast, when they started off with the carb portions first, we found that the ghrelin levels dropped, which they should every time you eat, but
Hmm.
then by the end of 3 hours, they actually rebound, so,
Mm.
so and I think that that's really interesting because that you know, tells you what that might mean for, somebody snacking again, right? Like you eat something and then again after 2 hours, you want to snack on something else.
That's right. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
I call ghrelin the hungry hormone. So
Hungry hormone.
suppression of that would be good. Who the heck wants that going off all in your body? You had a study, and this is really fascinating to me. Um, it was an adherence rate of this sequencing in your study where they you did it, and you changed the habit, and they stepped with this for some time, like 5 years or something. I'm not doing it justice, so please correct me. But I remember it was an easy habit for them to hold on to. Can you talk about that?
So we haven't done like the 5 year study yet.
Mhm. Okay.
So that
Okay.
is the plan to do, but we've done, our study at this point is like the 4 month study, and we did
Okay.
find that, during that period, what we found was that there was very high in, adherence to the food order intervention. Almost like 92% of the people said that they were able to do it more than 50% of the times.
Can
So
I
that's
just
a big,
interrupt you? I just
yeah,
want to tell you something. 92%
yes,
telling you that you can make a diet change after 4 months. 92%, that's
yes,
like A plus plus. Like
it
you
is.
you're never gonna see that. You never. Unbelievable. So they were able to
Yeah.
keep this habit going.
Yes, absolutely. And and we actually use this as part of our, counseling at the weight center. I
Hmm.
work at the Comprehensive Weight Control Center at Weill Cornell, and we've been in this field for a long time. And our dietitians have incorporated it, our colleagues as well. And I think that it's so much easier for people to actually change the order in which they eat as opposed to actually stop eating certain things or eating less of certain things.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I am lucky and fortunate enough to teach a course in Italy every summer for
Oh,
a
that's
month.
fun.
Yeah, I know, please. I'll fly you over and you can lecture.
Please.
Um, and and um, and you really get immersed into the Italian culture. But
Yes.
as in Europeans, and they eat vegetables first. This is like their natural way of doing that. They have salads first, or and eat their vegetables first, and they have these courses, and their meals are very long, but they eat the veg. So this is not like something, you know, new. I mean, this is culturally, people have been doing this. We just got to get it here in the States to do it, to think about that and remember that. So let's get some strategies here, because my listeners want to hear, okay, well, how can they do this? Like, what, let's at breakfast, like, how can you do this at breakfast to do the food order that'll be better for you?
Sure. So I think, of the 3 meals, the breakfast meal is actually the most difficult in practice,
Mm-hmm.
because people typically don't eat vegetables at breakfast time. But I have a strategy. So, and I
Mm.
think so what I tell patients is that, and I do it myself too, is
Mm-hmm.
do like a vegetable omelet,
Mm-hmm.
or scramble eggs with veggies in it,
Mm-hmm.
and then have that first, and then have your piece of toast after that,
Right.
multi-grain toast.
Great. Oh,
That's your food order for breakfast.
that's great. And what about lunch and dinner?
So lunch and dinner is much easier because I
Mm-hmm.
think, people do consume those different food components. They do, or they should consume all of those food components. And so I think that there are two strategies And we've tested both in our study. So because we realize that some people, it's hard for them to deconstruct the meal into those three components, it just doesn't fit into their cultural eating patterns. I mean, you think about a Chinese meal or an Indian
Right.
meal, it just doesn't, sit well. So what we also tested was, a strategy of just eating like a salad or vegetables first, and we added a fatty dressing, which was olive oil. So what
Mm-hmm.
you're getting are two things. You're getting the effect of fat, a high quality fat, and the effect of fiber. And
Mm-hmm.
the effect of those two things combined is to slow down again, and have a sort of a similar effect to doing both proteins and vegetables first. And so that is one strategy, just doing like a salad, first, or doing some grilled vegetables. I often tell my patients, just put in, it's think about any vegetable you like, because a lot of people don't like eating vegetables, so I say just pick any vegetable you like. Let's start with that first. And maybe stick it, put some olive oil, stick it in an air fryer. It doesn't have to be salad, it could be cooked vegetables.
It could be a mug of vegetable soup.
Correct. It could be a mug of vegetable soup. Perfect.
Right,
Yes.
right, right. And what you were saying before is that the fat slows down gastric emptying, the emptying of your stomach. So that's,
Yeah.
you don't have that spike going on there.
Yeah.
I like that idea. What if, okay, what if, like, I'm Italian. What
Okay.
if,
Yeah.
if don't mess with my pasta. What if,
Yeah.
like, you could do like if you have a pasta dish but you add tons of vegetables to it. In other words, like I used to say to my clients, when if you eat pasta, eat it in a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 cup of pasta to 1 cup of vegetables. So what if you had like a cultural dish that, had rice or pasta, but you added tons of vegetables to it? Would that help? Like well, you have to do it before.
So I think that it's so that is better than just
Hmm.
eating,
Yep.
of just the pasta without the vegetables.
Mm,
But what is even better than that is eating the vegetables first
first.
before the
Okay.
pasta. So
Right.
there's like a graded effect, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So you know something? Have a cup of soup and then the pasta with the vegetables, and then we go there.
Yeah.
That's great. What about snacks? So how do you have to, is it better to think of food order when you have a snack? Because I have to tell you, what's coming out now is a lot of younger folks are not having 3 meals a day. They're having like two and tons of snacks. So what do you, is there, should you there think about this when you're snacking?
So I do encourage people to think about it, where it is feasible. It may not always be possible, but, for example, say if you're snacking on fruits, and you're a person who needs to actually think about their sugars, regulate their sugars. And I encourage people to eat fruit because it's healthy. You get a lot of, good nutrients. It does have natural sugar, but I think a nice way to actually balance that off is to do maybe a few nuts, or a
Mm,
small piece of string cheese,
okay.
and have that first and then have your fruits. And so that can be a really nice, interesting snack, tastes good. And or pairing something like hummus and some veggies,
Right.
which is again,
Right.
you're getting some protein, you're getting some fiber and veggies
And
too,
a little bit of fat. So
and a
yeah.
little bit of fat as
Right.
well.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of the way I actually position, food order when it relates to snacks.
Yeah. Wow. I think this is absolutely fascinating. And I cannot wait. I'm going home. I'm food ordering everybody. Okay. When I have people, I'm gonna food order everybody. Uh, I'm gonna do this and I am gonna be your biggest fan and PR person to talk about you and your research because I think this is so easy for people to do. If there's a habit to change, and you're not asking them to give up anything. You're just
Right.
asking them the order and put some vegetables first, and how it can have a dramatic effect on blood glucose levels, potentially weight management, and improving the quality of diet. I mean, that's our three ringer there, right there. So the good doctor, I can't thank you enough for coming on Spot On.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, we can stop. Do that. Oh my God.